box is designed to survive temperatures up to 1100 degrees Celsius for half an hour. The tape recorder inside is protected by a capsule filled with water.
When the recorder heats up, the water turns to steam, absorbing the energy, and actually vents out through a little hole in the crash enclosure.
But when the flight data recorder is opened, investigators make a troubling discovery.
The FDR was totally damaged, impossible to read anything from it.
It was subjected to heat beyond the 30 minutes. The recorder was just never designed to withstand that kind of sustained heat.
And so we were very disappointed.
There's now only one hope for recovering the plane's flight data, a device called a Quick Access Recorder, or QAR. Maintenance workers use the QAR to access the plane's computers, but it also records some flight data. Unlike the black boxes, the QAR is stored near the cockpit.
Quick access recorders are not protected at all. They're up in the front end of the aircraft, typically in the electronics bay. They're generally destroyed just from the impact damage.
Investigators are encouraged to discover that in this case, the QAR has survived. But on closer examination, their optimism turns to frustration.
The last 20 centimeters of the tape were burned and stretched and were damaged to the point that we could not use them into a machine. We couldn't read it.
Investigators are desperate to retrieve the data, so they take a chance on an experimental technique. Known as the garnet technique, a light is shone through a mineral lens made of garnet.
Use a garnet stone to visualize the magnetic pulses that are actually recorded on the tape.
The special lens helps the technicians differentiate between the positive and negative magnetic pulses, which translate as binary digits, or bits.
There's 768 bits per second, so that's a lot of ones and zeros. You have to be very precise in moving the tape under the lens or the garnet to make sure you don't miss a bit or read the same bit twice, you know? So it's difficult.
Analyzing the data is even more painstaking.
It took about a day to read a second of recording. Any additional second recovered could reveal something that would make a difference.
The effort to retrieve all the QAR data could take a month or more. In the meantime, the focus of the investigation shifts to the cockpit voice recorder. It was positioned just above the other black box.
The cockpit voice recorder, which was just inches away, but outside of the ashes, had air passing over it, survived.
Runway 23. Otherwise,
the recording reveals the captain's anxiety early on in the flight.
You're taking 23 then?
Yes.
Investigators know that landing on runway 05 requires what's called a non-precision approach. That means pilots receive electronic guidance only on their horizontal position, left and right. They get no guidance when it comes to altitude.
The non-precision approach is significantly less accurate. Why, it's not really difficult, but they are less comfortable.
05. What sort of wind are they giving us? 18 knots. 18 knots.
The non-precision approach increases the demands on the pilots. Investigators can also hear that the captain had concerns about landing on runway 05.
48, Delta Alpha, you are number 1 with VOR DME runway 05.
Runway 05.
10 nautical. That won't work.
It's a lot of distress over a non-precision approach.
Wondering what can cause such distress, investigators research pilot training at Air Inter. They find that most pilots did not have extensive training making non-precision landings in the new A320.
I think we should have had double the training compared to an older plane.
Investigators asked the airline for detailed records on the pilot's history of runway approaches. They're intrigued by what they discover. Captain Heke had landed at Strasbourg countless times, but he had never landed an A320 there using a non-precision approach.
I'm not going to mess around like that descending at full speed.
Clearly, the captain was uneasy about having to execute a landing he had never made before.
I think the captain was worried about making it in a minimum amount of time, in the minimum amount of delay.
Have we been flying for 35 minutes yet?
And the co-pilot was worried about not getting in trouble by offending the captain.
At least that much.
More research into the pilot's work history offers yet another revelation. While the two pilots had flown more than 12,000 hours between them, they were both still relatively new to the highly advanced A320.
It's 05 in service.
The aviation community misunderstood the magnitude of changes brought by the new Airbus A320.
The captain had only 162 hours in the A320, and the co-pilot even less, just 61 hours.
Behind this accident scenario, there's an issue of confidence of the crew in themselves, in the aircraft.
18 knots. No chance.
They were not prepared, really, to fly in this kind of condition.
If they had warned us in advance, cripes!
Investigators conclude that the crew's training was insufficient. But that alone does not explain the crash.
Merde!
Investigators search for other factors in the crash of Flight 148. They review the conversations between the crew and air traffic controllers.
If you want, I can give you radar headings and take you to Anlo at 5,000.
Yeah, that's good.
The radar vector makes flying easier. The captain was happy because it was reducing his workload.
Turn left, steer 90.
With the controller's assistance, this landing should have been very simple. But when investigators reconstruct the plane's trajectory using radar information from various stations around the airport, they discover a shocking error.
The 090 heading started here.
090, 0 degrees, Delta Alpha.
But it won't take them to Andlo. Last radar vector the controller gave was incorrect. It sent them...
Thank you.
...closer to the mountain.
They were, of course, because of following the heading they got from the radar vectoring, they found themselves in this undershoot situation.
You're inside there. You should have started with 070.
Yeah.
Investigators are also troubled by the controller's choice of words when he warned the pilots, incorrectly, that they were headed to the right.
Delta Alpha, you're passing to the right of Anlo.
From the pilot's perspective, the plane was on the left side of the runway, not the right. It could only add to their confusion.
It was very poor guidance because he didn't employ the usual terminology.
Et il n'a pas utilisé la phraséologie standard.
Investigators recommend that controllers use only compass points when giving directions. Never the words right and left. The controller's mistakes clearly brought the plane closer to the mountain.
Turn left, steer 90. 090.
But once again, investigators feel they don't have the whole story.
It's not something totally abnormal to start a descent from this situation.
Flaps towards 2.
Flaps towards 2.
It's not what you expected to do every day, but it's not outside the tolerance